Baltimore, Maryland, known for its strong industrial and manufacturing history, as well as some of the most prestigious hospitals and universities. It's home to the Ravens football team and the birthplace of the U.S. national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner. Baltimore is also the birthplace of a man who became a mass murderer, a jail escapee, and a kidnapper, just to name a few. This is the intriguing story of Brian Nichols. Brian Nichols grew up in a middle-class household in Baltimore, Maryland, and attended Cardinal Gibbons School. He later attended Kutztown University of Pennsylvania from 1989 to 1990, where he played football and was known for having a knack for trouble. Berks County records show that Brian had been arrested at least 3 times during his short stay at the university. In 1990, he was charged with terroristic threats, simple assault, disorderly conduct, harassment stemming from an incident in the university's dining hall. According to the court documents, he pled guilty to the 2 lesser charges and the others were dropped. Brian then dropped out of college and moved to Georgia in 1995, where he worked with Hewlett-Packard and later UPS. By all accounts, Brian had turned over a new leaf and was on his way to a promising future. Brian snapped after discovering that his girlfriend was dating a minister from the church they both attended. He retaliated and was later arrested on multiple charges for rape, kidnapping, and assault of the former girlfriend. The first attempt at a trial ended in a mistrial with a hung jury. While awaiting a second trial, friends and family members of Brian expressed concern that he would attempt to escape and that he had tried to formulate an escape plan with a friend. Apparently, his girlfriend, yes, the same one that he assaulted and the reason for being in jail in the first place, was pregnant with his child. Brian expressed concern that he would be incarcerated and not be able to raise his son. This is where the story takes a wild turn. On March 11, 2005, Brian overpowered a sheriff's deputy named Cynthia Hall while changing clothes to prepare for his second trial. He stole her gun and severely beat her. According to hospital sources, the deputy sustained significant brain injury, facial fractures, and a large laceration to her forehead. Deputy Hall's injuries were so severe that doctors at Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta initially believed that she had sustained a gunshot wound to the face. After the attack, her condition was reported as critical, but she survived. Brian then walked into the Fulton County Courthouse searching for Superior Court Judge Roland Barnes. Although he ran into several people at the courthouse, no one was able to stop him. Nicole Waller, who was in the middle of a motions argument in a business contract case, stated, "He didn't look out of place at all. Nothing was wrinkled. When Brian found Judge Barnes, he shot him to death." He also killed court reporter Julianne Brando. Brian then fled. During his escape from the courthouse, Brian also killed Sergeant Hoyt Tinsley. He then carjacked several cars as he went on the run. Law enforcement personnel gathered outside the Fulton County Courthouse in Atlanta on Friday, March 11, 2005, in total shock and disbelief. A massive manhunt was launched. Later that night in Buckhead, a suburb just north of Atlanta, Brian shot and killed federal agent David Wilhelm. For 26 hours, authorities from all law enforcement agencies searched for Brian with no luck finding him. A reward was set in the amount of $70,000. Authorities announced anyone who gave information leading to Brian's arrest can claim the reward. After the killing in Buckhead, Brian then fled to Duluth, a suburb northwest of Atlanta. What started the beginning of the end for Brian was when Ashley Smith called 911, telling the operator that Brian was in her Duluth apartment. She later told authorities that he took her hostage for nearly 7 hours. Brian entered Ashley's life at about 2 a.m. on March 12, 2005. She had gone out to buy cigarettes and came back to find him sitting near her apartment door behind the wheel of a truck belonging to federal agent David Wilhelm, whom he had killed earlier. Ashley was a widowed mother of one and a drug addict. She said her life at the time was a mess. At Brian's request, Ashley gave him meth from her own stash. She had been an addict for years and let the drug rule her life. She let it take over enough that she surrendered custody of her own young daughter to an aunt more than 140 miles away in Augusta. Her aunt told her a couple of weeks before meeting Brian, "I pray that God changes you or takes you home." Ashley thought this was the man my aunt prayed for. As she sat face to face with the armed killer, God spoke to her and gave her a chance to change her life. Ashley says she quit drugs on the spot and began to read the Bible and talk to Brian, telling him everyone has done bad things in their lives, and she has been there. Ashley spoke with Brian for hours about her daughter, her husband's stabbing death years ago, and her faith in God. She said she told Brian that he might be destined to be caught so he could spread the word of God to fellow prisoners. This conversation touched Brian, being that he was a former believer and once attended church himself. Amazingly, Brian surrendered. He allowed Ashley to call the police for him to turn himself in. The police came and took him into custody without incident. Ashley stated, "My life is a testimony that God can use even in the midst of tragedy, and miracles do happen." Brian told police during his confession he felt like a soldier on a mission, exacting revenge on the judicial system he feels was unfair to African Americans. He feared he was about to go to prison for a rape that he claims he did not commit, and grew weary of awaiting trial in a jail and looking at a sea full of black faces. Brian was charged with 54 counts in 2008, including murder, kidnapping, and armed robbery. The jury deliberated for 12 hours over 2 days before finding Brian guilty of all 54 counts on November 7, 2008. On December 13, 2008, Brian was sentenced to multiple life sentences with no chance of parole. The judge handed down the maximum sentence on each of the charges to run consecutively. He made a point to say, "If there was any more I could give you, I would." Brian was spared multiple death sentences when the jury failed to reach a unanimous decision as required by Georgia law to recommend the death penalty. Some family members of the victims filed civil lawsuits against Fulton County, Georgia. Judge Barnes' widow won a $5.2 million lawsuit. County commissioners agreed to pay $5 million to Christina, the daughter of Julianne Brando, the court reporter. Ashley, Brian's hostage, was presented with the $70,000 in reward money for helping authorities capture him. She received multiple invitations to talk shows and magazines to tell her story. Eventually, she wrote a book about her ordeal with Brian titled Unlikely Angel, The Untold Story of the Atlanta Hostage Hero. The book was adapted into a film, Captive, in 2015. Ashley is now remarried with 3 children. She says she is just trying to continue using her experience to help others and enjoy the life she's lucky enough to lead. Nichols is incarcerated in a Georgia state prison.